evening, everybody. Recently, I sat through and watched the whole 35 minutes of Ray Comfort's new movie, Evolution vs. God, mainly so that you don't have to. This movie is billed as being so powerful that it will shake the faith of anyone who believes in evolution. But don't take my word for it. See for yourself.
Faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence. Richard Dawkins.
Imagine visiting some of the world's most prestigious universities, interviewing top evolutionary scientists, atheists, and holding their feet to the fire until it's clear that there is no evidence for Darwinian evolution, that it's not scientific.
So we have thousands of examples. Can you give me one? I can give you thousands, just one.
To summarize, the observable evidence that you give me for Darwinian evolution is bacteria becoming bacteria. Still bacteria, there's no change of claims.
Evolution versus God. If you believe in evolution, prepare to have your faith shaken.
You know, the problem with those who are unable to see evolution, I think, is they don't have imaginations.
That is so true.
Now, having watched that, you may be wondering just what earth-shattering evidence Ray is about to present that will demonstrate that one of the cornerstones of modern science is incorrect. Could it be that Ray can conclusively prove that gene frequencies within breeding populations do not change over time in response to changing conditions acting upon those populations? Or could it be that he presents a serious explanation as to why bananas fit so well in the hand, dogs fit in small cars, and nobody has yet found a real-life example of one of these? Or does he get an exclusive interview with God himself, who, on camera, admits that the universe is all his own work, before proceeding to show exactly how he can create things out of nothing by simply speaking them into existence? Well, what do you think? This is, after all, a Ray Comfort movie that we're talking about. No, of course not. We're treated to 35 minutes of Ray Comfort asking a bunch of students sat outside a university a long list of stupid questions, and a handful of world-renowned biologists looking confused. Of course, these four professors are not confused because they cannot answer the questions that Ray asked them. They're simply confused because the questions don't make any logical sense, and that Ray doesn't seem to be able to understand basic biology. Now, contrary to popular perception, Ray Comfort is neither a complete idiot nor ignorant of how things like evolution work. A person cannot have something like evolution explained to him as many times as Ray has by so many people for so many years and not start to take some of it on board. Likewise, regardless of how he likes to portray himself, Ray isn't in the soul-saving business either. He's in the book and DVD selling business, and going by the tax returns filed by his company, Living Waters, he's quite good at it too, given that he sells millions of dollars worth of that crap that he peddles every year. What Ray is also exceptionally good at is finding idiots. And talking of idiots, Ray knows his target market very well indeed. For instance, he knows full well that in most cases, the only way that the people in his target market are going to be let into a university is when they're either carrying a mop, a bucket, or if they're in a glass jar full of formaldehyde. So he knows that if he shows a person in one of his movies that is at a university, regardless of whether they're a professor or an undergraduate student on their first day there, his audience are going to assume that this person is an expert at fucking everything. And in the case of the students, they already know all of the things that they're attending that university to learn. And it's to these people at university, or rather the self-professing atheist students, that Ray puts his questions to, again and again and again, all throughout the movie, rather than the four professors that feature so prominently in the trailer, who only appear at brief intervals. metaphors. Of course, we do have to give Ray credit for his persistence, because, as he said in the trailer, he visited many top-rated universities all over the country. Yet, somehow, out of what must have been literally hundreds, if not thousands of interviews, managed to find enough idiots wearing sunglasses, that we'll talk about later, that were willing to go on camera, and who were confused enough to agree to appear in his film. Of course, it's not entirely their fault. Not everyone has experienced the amusement and joy of witnessing a creationist lying for Jesus at full throttle. And though Ray may be internet famous, in the real world, he's hardly a household name. So it is entirely likely that these people were completely unprepared for Ray's particular style of questioning. You see, creationists like Ray have been in the game long enough to know full well that when talking to people who are bright enough to get into university, he'd be laughed off campus if he did an Ian Juby or an Eric Hovind. And he started to tell people that the world is only 6,000 years old. The Noah's Ark story is real, and Adam and Eve fed carrots to dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus Rex in the Garden of Eden. So he has to rely on a different tactic. And in this case, that tactic is to play stupid word games. You see, in the creationism debate, and I say creationism because in the scientific world there is no debate over evolution, certain things said in certain ways can make a very big difference. For instance, saying that you either accept or believe the Bible is very much the same thing, and it has no further implications. However, saying that you believe evolution rather than you accept it allows people like Ray to seize on the word believe and turn it into the word faith, and then claim that you have blind faith, and to prove it, they then challenge you to produce things like observable evidence of such things happening right now, knowing full well that you can't, because such things happen over tens of thousands of years, rather than over the length of an afternoon, and this is exactly what Ray does in this movie. Yes, that's right. Ray's earth-shattering proof that evolution is a belief is that several unsuspecting university students use the word believe when acknowledging their acceptance of a scientific theory. Sure, there's the odd animated sequence here and there, but they mostly involve a voiceover by Ray, asserting that things like natural selection are really just examples of adaptation or variation within the kinds, and that vestigial features actually do have uses, regardless of the fact that these uses might be very different from their original uses, which nobody is actually trying to deny. But what about his claim that these people accept evolution on blind faith? Well, unsurprisingly enough, this is done with yet another silly word game, which, to their credit, is not lost on the various professors to which Ray poses his questions to. Of course, folks like P.Z. Myers are familiar with Ray's routine, and they know full well what he's up to, yet this isn't necessarily the case with the students. They don't spot that he's actually asking them a loaded and malformed question, when he asks them to, and I quote, provide observable evidence, which is the scientific method, for Darwinian evolution, which is a change of kinds. This is a deceptive question for many reasons, but mainly because it not only tries to give an extremely narrow and misleading definition of the scientific method, it also very deliberately oversimplifies and misstates the theory of evolution, by defining it in very general terms by using the word kinds, which is a term that can be used to differentiate between plants and animals when talking about different kinds of organism, or to differentiate between different breeds when talking about different kinds of dog. And because of this, he is essentially asking the person to provide evidence for new classes of organism arising over the same time span that it takes to breed a new breed of dog. You see, when Ray talks about kinds, what he's really talking about are biblical kinds, which are distinct types of animal, such as cats and dogs and cows and horses, which he sees as having no shared lineage with any other kind of animal. This is done so that Ray's question is understood by members of his real target audience, who generally all believe that a lion and a house cat are the same kind, just like a dog and a wolf, and each kind of animal came off Noah's boat in the Bronze Age, and due to some form of hyper-evolution, diversified into all of the species of felines and canines that we have today. But naturally, because the person being asked the question has a firm understanding of the theory of evolution, they think Ray is asking them for observable evidence of one species evolving into another. And they don't realize that Ray is actually asking them for observable evidence of fish evolving into amphibians, or amphibians evolving into reptiles, or reptiles evolving into mammals and birds, which in reality is a process that, in total, took hundreds of millions of years. This is very apparent when Ray poses this same question to the various professors, all give him numerous examples of speciation, to which Ray replies that the resultant new species produced are still the same kind of animal, as the new species are still a bacterium or a fish or a bird. Naturally, with the four professors, this reply is met with astonished amusement, and P.Z. Myers plays him at his own game and points out that, in the example that he provided, the two different resultant species may still be fish, but they are in fact completely different kinds of fish. That one exchange was just about the only thing in the entire 35 minutes of the movie that will come even close to bringing a smile to the informed viewer's face. Of course, when he asked the students this question and clarified what he was really asking for, he was met with stunned silence and confusion, which he then uses as evidence that there is no evidence for such a thing occurring, which Ray then combines with his earlier so-called evidence that acceptance of evolution is in fact a belief, to claim that this acceptance was in fact blind faith. It goes without saying that Ray doesn't show any footage of all those people who mention the fossil record, taxonomy, or the retroviral markers found in the genomes of all living things that has allowed scientists to classify various organisms and precisely position them on what is more commonly referred to as the tree of life, as that would no doubt destroy his entire argument. What happens next, however, is entirely bewildering, and I can only imagine that it's some kind of an in-joke amongst creationists, because I cannot see how it could possibly relate to the validity of the scientific theory of evolution. Believe it or not, Ray then starts asking people if they can name any famous atheists, as if a person's ability to reel off a list of famous names has any bearing on the validation of a scientific theory that accounts for the variance of gene frequencies in breeding populations over time in response to varying influences. The viewer is left scratching their head as to why not one person in the movie can name a single famous atheist, such as Bill Gates, Jodie Foster, Douglas Adams, Kathy Griffin, Stephen Hawking, George Orwell, Aaron Rand, half the cast of Doctor Who, the guy who owns Facebook, and Joseph Bloody Starling, to name but a few. It can only be imagined that this was either some kind of dig at Ray's arch-nemesis, Richard Dawkins, or Ray's way of letting the intelligent people watching his movie in on the secret that all of the students that I interviewed were as dumb as a stump, and lived under a rock, and you shouldn't be surprised if when you next see them they will be asking you if you want fries with your order. However, if this wasn't irrelevant enough, Ray then goes on to deconstruct an internet meme, which mistakenly portrays certain famous people as atheists. Ironically enough, this part happens to be the only time in the whole 35 minutes that the movie runs to that Ray actually presents anything that can be considered to be remotely factual evidence to back up his assertions, and Ray should be congratulated for demonstrating that 14-year-olds on 4chan know fuck all, and need to spend more time on their academic studies. Maybe this stunning victory could mark a turning point in Ray's career, and years from now, rather than being famous for his antics with a banana, he will be remembered as the guy that successfully divided by zero. And with pictures that were in fact related, prove that Longcat wasn't really all that long, golfers are neither dramatic nor shoot laser beams out of their eyes, and that, contrary to popular wisdom, the cake is in fact true. Maybe Ray's next movie will be called Ray vs. Memes, where he attempts to rebut Richard Dawkins' famous book, The Selfish Gene, where the term was coined, by asking numerous assorted idiots he's managed to stop on the street if they can provide demonstrable evidence of how the magical invisible pink unicorn can be both invisible and pink at the same time, and if they think that the flying spaghetti monster is really made out of spaghetti or not. But I digress. From this point onwards, things start to take a predictable turn. And before you know it, he's asking people what they would do if they saw both their evil neighbour and their beloved pet dog drowning, and could save only one of them. All of the people shown in the movie stated that they would choose to save their dog instead of their neighbour, presumably because they're all atheists and immoral, but also because they're not quick enough on their feet to suggest that they would save their neighbour in return for their neighbour saving their dog. And then, because this is a Ray Comfort movie, the inevitable happens. And Ray starts to ask people if they've ever told a lie, blasphemed, or watched porn. Which we presume is the kind of porn where the woman tells the guy that he's so good, and then shouts, "Oh God, a lot." Naturally, as almost every person that he puts his question to is an atheist, all of them readily admit to these immoral acts, including the Christian guy sat in front of the caution tape that was presumably put around Ray with signs warning passers-by that they would be entering a zone of extreme stupidity and dishonesty if they did get any closer to him. This goes on ad nauseum until almost the end of the movie, where Ray then shows a number of clips from news articles about whales evolving from land animals, clues to human evolution found in fish, and tyrannosaurs evolving into chickens, all contrasted with either misunderstood and out-of-context answers, or the dumb answers given by some student's dad who just happened to be on campus dropping them off. Then finally, we're presented with a summation by Ray, who, decked out in his comfort zone shirt, tells us that the scientific theory of evolution is nothing more than a belief, and the people who accept it with blind faith. And without seeing even the smallest shred of irony, he follows this with a quote from his old pal Richard Dawkins, who once said that faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence, which is rather fitting considering that throughout the entire movie, Ray has not even attempted to show a single reason why anyone's acceptance of the theory of evolution could be shaken by the moronic answers given by the assortment of university students who answered Ray's trick questions. But then again, you, as the viewer, may be tricked into thinking that this movie is aimed at atheists and people who accept Darwin's theory of evolution as a valid theory, and its intention is to somehow convince them that they're wrong. But you'd be mistaken. As I said, Ray knows his target market, and he knows full well that it isn't atheists who buy his books and DVDs because most of them think that he's an arsehole, and have evidence to prove it. No. Ray makes it quite clear that he wants to get DVDs of this movie out there by the lorry load, and that his intention is for every university student in every university in the land to be presented with a copy of it free of charge. And if you happen to be someone who's interested in helping, then he'll give you a discount on bulk orders. Ray knows full well that a lot of money goes into those collection baskets every Sunday, and that there's no such thing as a poor church, and he wants a slice of it, which is probably why the final 5 minutes of the version of the movie that can be downloaded from Ray's website is nothing more than adverts for the Creation Museum, Ray's books, and Ray's show, The Way of the Master. Ray's movie is aimed squarely at evangelical church congregations who don't recognize the deceptive word games that Ray's playing, or realize that, out of the hours of interview footage that according to the companion guide that accompanies Ray's movie he obtained, he was only able to find a scant couple of minutes worth of usable sound bites, and even then, it's obvious that those 4 university professors didn't take him at all seriously, and were either very obviously frustrated or mildly amused at Ray's responses to their answers. Professor Gail Kennedy, the woman who appears to be sitting at a 45-degree angle to prevent Ray from sticking his microphone up her nose, appears to have her "you've gotta be fucking joking" face on, while PZ Miles managed to outfox Ray with ease, to the point of making Ray look downright stupid, even to folks who might think that Ray is right. It leads the informed viewer to think that this movie would have a rather decidedly different tone to it, if only Ray had used more than 2 minutes of that interview footage in it, as his trailer suggests. Which is probably why he didn't. Oblivious evangelicals won't want to stand outside universities handing out boxloads of DVDs for free to anyone who looks remotely intelligent at $2 a pop if the DVD contained anything that even remotely challenges their preconceived worldview that evolution is a unsubstantiated belief and that people believe in it through blind faith. As for the university students that receive the DVD, well, they're going to be spending thousands of dollars a year in tuition fees to be shown the real scientific evidence for evolution, and it's hardly likely that a 35-minute movie featuring interviews with a bunch of students wearing sunglasses is going to challenge their minds. Which brings us right back to the small matter of what can be seen being reflected in those sunglasses. Well, if we go back to this guy that appears right at the beginning of the movie, no more than 2 minutes from the start, and you slow down the footage and look very, very carefully at what is being reflected in his mirrored lenses, you see this guy. And if you look really carefully, you will realize that it's actually Ray Comfort himself, laughing all the way to the bank with the money that he fleeces out of Christians every time he releases another one of his movies.